Let's talk about one of the currencies in League of Legends. Fortunately for all of you Americans, Hong Kongians, Norwegians, and Denmarkians who just finished spending the entirety of your last paycheck on gas, this currency can't be bought with real-world money, and only exists within each League of Legends match. The magical currency is, drumroll please, gold. During a game of League, you will earn gold in one or more of 4 ways. The first is everyone's favorite, killing enemy players. The second is my favorite, murdering enemy minions that repeatedly spawn in each lane. I'm sorry, did I say murdering? I meant kindly and peacefully terminating their existence, by getting the final hit that kills them. The third is killing neutral monsters that spawn between the lanes, and the last is with a support item that can be bought in the shop. Also, everyone generates gold passively. That's all well and good, but unless you know how the shop works, all of that gold is as useless to you as a North American esports team at the League of Legends World Championship. The in-game shop allows you to buy items that enhance your power. But first, in order to understand what the items we buy in the shop do for us, we have to understand how stats work. In League, there are 3 types of damage. There's physical damage, magical damage, and true damage. Champions' abilities will have a certain damage type, indicated by orange or blue text. Blue text means the ability does magical damage, while orange text means the ability does physical damage. Each champion has an attack damage and ability power stat. Many abilities will have a base damage value plus a percentage of your champion's attack damage or ability power. Auto attacks, or right-clicking on an enemy, will deal 100% of your attack damage stat. Both of these damage types have a corresponding defensive stat to counter them. For physical damage, that resistance is armor, while for magical damage, the resistance is MR, or magic resist. Having a higher armor stat reduces the damage that physical damage abilities or auto attacks do to you, while having a higher MR stat reduces the damage of abilities that deal magical damage. Both of them reduce the damage of the corresponding type by a certain percentage. There are also stats that deal with these resistances. Lethality makes your physical damage ignore a flat amount of the enemy's armor stat. Armor penetration makes your physical damage ignore a percentage of the enemy's armor stat. Lastly, magical penetration makes your magical damage ignore a percentage of the enemy's magical resist stat. You mathematics majors may be quaking in your boots right now, because not only was that a lot of information overload, but I said there were 3 damage types, and we've only covered 2. Well, I'm here to tell you to lower your cortisol levels, because the last type is much simpler than the others. The third type of damage doesn't have its own stat, and instead is built into some abilities, as indicated by a white text in their description. It is called true damage because the damage numbers you see are always 100% accurate. That's right, there is no way to resist this type of damage. It does not care if you're married to Jeff Bezos. No amount of armor or magic resist you buy will offer protection against true damage. The only way to protect yourself from this damage type is to submit a support ticket straight to Riot Games, desperately begging them to nerf whatever champion killed you. Now that you understand how damage types and resistances work, let's quickly run through the stats in the game and what they mean. Buying an item will increase one of these stats, so knowing what they do allows you to tell what an item offers you. Holding the C key or opening the shop will show you all of your stats. This first stat is HP regen. This is how much health you will passively regenerate over every 5 seconds. The next is mana regen. This is how much mana you will regenerate over every 5 seconds. Mana is a resource used to cast abilities. The next 2 are lethality and magic resist, which we already covered. Lifesteal heals you for percentage of the damage you deal with your auto attacks. Physical vamp heals you for percentage of any physical damage you do, and omni vamp heals you for percentage of any damage you deal. This includes magical and true damage. Attack range is the distance you can auto attack people from. Tenacity helps you avoid getting stun locked harder than a World of Warcraft player by reducing the effectiveness of crowd control effects, which are effects that impair your control of your champion or movement, such as stuns, slows, taunts, fears, silences, binds, polymorphs, and immobilizing effects. Effects that knock you up or suppress you won't be affected by your tenacity. These 4 are your attack damage, ability power, armor, and magic resist respectively. If you hover over your armor or magic resist, you can see the percentage of damage each one is blocking. Your attack speed number is the amount of auto attacks you can do in a single second. The higher the number, the closer you are to having a machine gun. Ability haste lets you use your abilities more often. The more ability haste you have, the less time you have to wait between each cast. Critical strike chance is the percentage chance that an auto attack becomes a critical hit. A critical hit does 175% of your attack's damage. Lastly, we have what is probably the most confusing, which is movement speed, which, bear with me here, is the speed of your movement. Now that you're an expert on how damage and stats work, let's get back to the shop. The shop is at spawn and can be accessed by clicking on the gold at the bottom right. You can only buy or sell while in the fountain at your spawn. Upon starting each game, you will be granted 500 gold as a stimulus check. Before you leave spawn, you will want to buy a starter item and some health potions. In the recommended tab, you will be presented with the most common starting items for your champion. You can hover over these items to see the stats that they give you, as well as the passive effects for each one. If you choose an item in the recommended tab, you will automatically spend the rest of your gold on health potions, which will be put in your item bar, and can be activated with the corresponding hotkey to regenerate a small amount of HP over time. If you want to buy them manually at any point, they can be found in the upper left of your shop, but most people don't buy them after the start of the game. After playing for a while, you may return to the base with built up gold, but not yet have enough to purchase any of the recommended items. This is where components come into play. Each full item is comprised of smaller, weaker items which are combined to make the final product. By clicking on any item in the shop, you can see the components underneath of it. As you work towards purchasing the item, you can buy the components that you are able to afford to give yourself a portion of the stats. The gold you spend on components will count towards the completion of the item. It's like buying slices of a pizza so you can eventually put them together to make a whole pizza. Which, now that I say it out loud, sounds pretty stupid, but you get the point. Most champions will build as their first item what is known as a mythic item. These are keystone items which are more powerful than most others. You can only have one mythic item. All other finished items will be legendary items or your boots. And your mythic will grant extra stats for each legendary item you finish. The epic and basic tiers of items are simply component items for building either legendary or mythic. In the bottom left of the shop are boots. You can only have one of these and will build it after or before your first item. These mostly grant movement speed, but also special effects depending on the type of boot you buy. You'll want to buy these on every champion that you play. Hovering over an item will show you the stats that it will grant as well as the passive or active abilities that it grants. Active abilities can be used by pressing the corresponding hotkey for the item slot it is in, just like you did with the health potions. Because itemization is often done as a response to different variables in the game, it may help you to stick to choosing items from the recommended page, or using an online source such as Mobalytics, which will give you a list of items in order that your champion usually builds. Because you know what the stats do and how to navigate the shop now, you can understand what the items do, and eventually branch away from the recommended builds. Hopefully, you better understand how to spend your well-earned gold in the shop to get an edge on the enemy. If you have more specific questions, or any part of the shop that you're struggling to navigate, leave a comment below and I'll be happy to explain. But for now, we've come to the end of our time.